special space edition of World Insight. Space, the final frontier. After China's moon rock mission is accomplished, what's next for space exploration? Next stop, Mars and beyond? To boldly go where no one has gone before.
For space, year 2020 promised to be a very, very interesting year with many, many new initiatives and interesting projects.
Here's our host, Tian Wei.
Hello and welcome to World Insight, and welcome to this very special edition about the outer space exploration for the year 2020. I'm Tian Wei. Despite the pandemic, 2020 has seen a real number of countries for space exploration. Last week, China's lunar probe Chang'e 5 successfully returned to Earth with samples collected from both the lunar surface and beneath, the conclusion of China's 3 lunar exploration goals. It's a milestone not only for China's space program, but also for global efforts to study the moon. Besides lunar trips, missions set for Mars made great progress this year as well, including the United Arab Emirates' first ever interplanetary Hope Mars mission, China's first Mars exploration mission, Tian Wei 1, and NASA's Perseverance. Meanwhile, space tourism has also become more popular. Elon Musk's SpaceX became the first commercial company to send NASA astronauts to the station on board a reusable Crew Dragon spacecraft. But there are also failures. One of them, the recent explosion of a prototype SpaceX reusable rocket during a test flight in Texas. So many questions are being asked. A serious space exploration, the silver lining of the year 2020 going into next year. What's next for future missions, and how are companies, governments, and different other players come into the mission? Let's ask our panelists. For the space exploration for the year 2020 in Beijing, we have Yang Yuguang, Professor of China Aerospace Science and Industry Cooperation. In Rome, Giuseppe Rabaldi, who is the President of the Moon Village Association and Director of Human Spaceflight, International Academy of Astronautics. And last but not least, in Washington, D.C., Dr. Amitash Goel, Chair of the Science Operations Working Group of the NASA Mars Exploration Rover Mission. Gentlemen, welcome to the program. Giuseppe, I have to say, it's a busy year for the moon, isn't it? I'm sure you observe it from the very beginning until now. China just had a wonderful and successful moon mission. And how do you look at the latest development?
This year has been a busy year, but the next year will be even more busy. As you all know, there is going to be an increasing number of moon missions. The just concluded Chang'e 5 mission is really a wonderful and very exciting achievement of China technology, and it is basically a preparation for future major mission. What this mission has achieved goes well beyond basically the scientific objective, which is returning samples on Earth. It is a major technological achievement by demonstrating a way to go on the moon and come back, which will be used most likely also from future Chinese astronauts.
Though that was done already decades ago in the United States by the American side, how do you look at now, Giuseppe, if I could continue, the China development and also the U.S. mission of 2024?
Well, there are major differences between about 50 years ago and what's going on right now. 50 years ago, the technology and the cost was immense. We all know how much it costed the Apollo program. Nobody can afford it any longer, this kind of mission. So it was basically a political achievement which need to be done no matter what was basically the cost. So cost was not an issue. We are now in this, say, after 50 years, technology has matured, and a lot of exponential, let's say, development have reached to the point that the cost of going to the moon is substantially lower and allows a number of stakeholders of different countries, from India to China, but of course to many other countries in the world, Europe, Russia, and so forth, to go back to the moon, and in particular with the industry. So the main difference is the cost. That's the first one. And the second is the fact that there is a prospect for economic development going forward to the moon.
Now, Mr. Yang, what about for you, the latest mission from China?
Well, you see, this year is really a big year or a peak year for China Aerospace. This year, we have a test launch of the Long March 5B launch vehicle, which is also belongs to the Long March 5 family, but it is a 1.5 stage version, which is used to, in the future, launch the modules of China's future space station. And also, in this mission, we also test the new generation manned spaceship, a test vehicle. Although it is a test vehicle, but we test many new technologies. So in the future, it can be recognized as a preparation for the future human missions to the moon. And also, as we have already discussed, the Chang'e 5, the sample return mission, really, really impressive and really, really exciting. So this is a very good milestone for China Aerospace. Because you see that this time, this is the first time we have a manned rendezvous and docking on the lunar orbit. This is, although we've already experienced many firsts for China, for instance, such as the first liftoff from another celestial body, the first time we collected samples from another celestial body, and the first time we come back to the Earth with a velocity of 11 kilometers per second. But lunar orbit rendezvous and docking, a manned version, is the first time in the world.
How do you see the early question about U.S. also working on 2024 returning to the moon?
Until now, we can see the annual the fiscal investment from the U.S. government, but we don't think this already enough for this mission. You see that they still have many works to do, such as they must develop another lunar module to have transportation from the lunar surface to the lunar orbit. So they have provided this kind of chances to the private companies, as we've already discussed, Blue Origin or SpaceX. But still there are uncertainties because from the experience in the Apollo program, it is very difficult and it's really tough.
What about for you, Dr. Ghosh, when you're listening to your two other colleagues talking about the possibilities 2024?
50 years ago, we went to the moon as a curiosity. We thought that, well, this is such a distant object in the sky, can we even go there? Now, everyone, including China, including the US, everyone is going there as a destination to further, explore more, set up a base, multiple manned missions. So it's a very different stage we are in. The second question that you talked about, the US mission, I think Artemis is supposed to land in 2024. There may be initial hiccups, and this is very normal in space exploration. The schedules always slip. But I think the direction is very clear. It is going to go to the moon, and perhaps it might slip, but it will still be the moon. And if it's just not NASA, I mean, you will perhaps have a SpaceX mission too. Before they are trying to fly to Mars, but Mars is 7 months away, and so this is 3 days away. So perhaps you will have a SpaceX mission sometime in the next 3-4 years. I think multiple countries have realized that the moon is what perhaps makes sense more than Mars. Mars will always be there because
Mars
it's
will always
perhaps the long-term goal. Right. It is the long-term goal. It is the most Earth-like planet, and it is a planet where there was water, and perhaps, which means perhaps could have been life before water or life evolved on Earth. See, the Earth did not have any oceans for the first 700 million years, and that is the time early Mars had oceans. So I think Mars will always be there.
Yeah, we have a Mars person and we have a moon person in our conversation. Mr. Riboldi, it seems that Dr. Ghosh is saying, well, moon is more pragmatic. Let's go to the moon, even though he's working on the Mars. you know, how do you see the achievements of 2020 and the agendas the various space agencies around the world are setting for themselves, bringing us ever closer to the moon? What's likely to be the next stage of the moon exploration?
Well, the next stage of the moon exploration is already started. A number of countries are going to send spacecraft, unmanned spacecraft to the moon in the next few years, and this will be followed by humans. United States and hopefully China will be definitely going to do that, hopefully. So the way forward is an increasing exploration and basically utilization of the moon. I like to make this point very clear, which is the main difference compared also to 50 years ago. 50 years ago, as our colleague told us, it was something of a curiosity, but was a political as well. This time there are clear indications that the moon have resources which can be used for creating commercial market.
Yeah.
This is going to be the main ingredient for a sustainable lunar exploration.
How big is that market, Mr. Riboldi?
Well, it depends who you talk to, and we have also to be, as always, very pragmatic. There are very crude estimations. Some people estimate in several billions because basically water is going to be the gold, let's say, standard for the utilization and exploration of the moon. But it's a large, very large market according to many scientific assessment.
How would you make about the fact that China is mainly still a state approach? Well, for example, in the United States and some of the other countries, it is much more a diversified portfolio, even though the success of which we still do not know. Mr. Yang.
Last year in July, we talked about the first orbital launch of a private company. I am the chief designer of its payload, balloon satellite. So you see, the state-owned companies, our satellite, choose the private companies as they provide us the launch services. So I don't think there is a conflict between the state-owned companies or the private company. Of course, from the commercial aspect, they do have competitions because these kinds of competitions can bring not only innovation but also brings efficiency, low cost to our space industry. So this is a very good sign, and I believe in the future the private companies in China will also sooner or later have its own missions to the moon or even to Mars.
So how much benefit will China's moon program really bring, statistically speaking, to China's own both scientific and economical development?
You see that we have navigation satellites, we have observation satellites, and we have the communication satellites. These spacecraft can bring directly returns to our national economy. But for the exploration, such as the manned space activities, our moon activities, they are really, really important as those satellites. But most of the returns are indirect. So it is very difficult for us to describe. There are some examples, such as the diapers and also the nice frying pans, the dried vegetables. But these are very small examples.
Those were examples, of course, that was as a result of the moon exploration 5 decades ago by the U.S. Dr. Ghosh.
Coming to market, I think we were discussing this. I think we are at this stage where we are about to break into a market, but we don't really know why. It's not possible to estimate it. What is it as a common citizen that you can think of that you will need from the moon? The only thing that I can think about is tourism. I don't think you will need soil from the moon, just as a curiosity maybe, but not in scale. But tourism is something, I think, which will, at least the private players think that it will be a big thing.
Right.
Space tourism. If 50,000 tourists were to go to the moon every year, that would be a $50 billion business.
We have seen exploration of the moon. There were certain so-called accord earlier promoted by the United States. It's called the Artemis Accord. Now, Mr. Riboldi, what do you make of that accord? How do you see the rules of the moon exploration and also further research about the moon will be correlated among all that could make it possible?
Okay, so let me first explain briefly what the Artemis Accord are. Artemis Accord are basically a tool which United States requires in order to implement the Artemis program. This is not particularly new. In the International Space Station, there has been similar type of agreement. The main difference between the space stations and the Artemis is that NASA and United States have included in the Artemis Accord some general principle of behavior of the countries which they are working with them. But of course, countries working in the same project, they have by definition a unified management structure which is led by NASA. The challenge, and therefore the countries which are signed and will sign Artemis, participate in the Artemis project, they will have to abide by to the Artemis Accord. The main challenge is to go beyond the countries which are included in the Artemis project. And this is exactly the challenge that the Moon Village Association, for instance, is taking on it by suggesting a definition of best practices and by trying to bring together to the same virtual table all countries, space agency, industry, academia, and the public in the definition of what is needed to move forward in a peaceful and cooperational way towards future lunar activity. You see, there is a risk that countries do not talk to each other going to very similar locations like the South Pole. So we need to really have an international understanding how to behave in going in a very responsible way, in a way that is predictable and is known by all the countries. We need to make sure that we do not pollute the moon with debris like we unfortunately have been done on Earth, so on and so forth. So we need a dialogue on all these kind of important issues on a global level, which will be made at the level of the COPUS, United Nations of the Space Office, but of course we need to prepare this discussion.
How is China prepared in this rule-setting period of discussion?
I watched many analyses on China's media. Some experts think that the Artemis Accord is an obstacle to prevent China and the U.S. to cooperate together. Because you see, this is maybe another duplication of the ISS program. You see that China don't have attended the ISS, International Space Station. So in the future, because you see, as you already asked, we China have our own space program, like the lunar exploration program, and we already have a very close cooperation with European side, and also in the future we also have an agreement with cooperation with Russia and with other countries. Our space station will be an open laboratory to the whole world, that any scientists from any countries can deliver their application to have experiments on board this station. And also Europe have already have cooperation with China in training astronauts. So both nations from China side and from the Italian side has some kind of agreement on government level to have these kind of cooperations. The China scientists and also the leaders from China's aerospace has already expressed their wish to have a manned space program to the moon. So you see, our scientists and also those from the industry have the wish to cooperate together, either if those from China or from US. But still there are obstacles in policy.
Okay, Dr. Ghosh.
I think the desire from the US side, and I'm not speaking on a personal capacity, is to have as many countries sign on. It's just like the nations, you know. I think the greater the number of countries that accept the platform, the better it is. I don't think there is the collaboration, the cooperation between US and China is a different question.
Yeah. Okay. Mr. Riboldi, you want to say something?
No, I just want to make it clear that, again, the Artemis Accord is an implementation instrument for the Artemis project. So if countries belong to the Artemis project, which is led by the United States, then those Artemis Accord apply. If not, obviously they do not apply. That's why I try to explain that it's very important that we do this discussion on a global scale, and the sooner the better, because there is a lot of countries, in particular probably India and China, which will not probably be part of the Artemis project for a number of reasons, and as many other also stakeholders like industry. So we need to get this discussion going in order to have a common understanding on how to behave to the moon. That's an important element to understand.
It's absolutely an important element. The year 2020, several new developments, for example, SpaceX. We've seen some success. We have also seen some failure, given the latest example. So, Dr. Ghosh, how do you see this, the development on the commercial side and SpaceX becoming ever more proactive, and yet the pictures are pretty much divided about success and failures over the past year?
Well, I think it's very positive. I mean, the SpaceX launch vehicle that they are building to take humans to Mars, it had its first test. I think it was a success, although in the end the vehicle caught fire. I think that the strides that SpaceX and Blue Origins, but perhaps more SpaceX has made, is incredible in this very limited amount of time. This is a startup company started 15 years ago. There's a very critical difference between how the private sector operates and the government sector operates. The government sector is just delivering a project. And this is true, I think, all over the world.
Okay.
The private sector is trying to do this once and trying to maximize the return. So famously they say, they design one car, but they sell 20,000.
Mr. Riboldi, please.
Well, I think, as it has been said, there's been an enormous, outstanding success. SpaceX has managed to qualify the Dragon spacecraft, which is now going to be used as a routine and even for tourists. This is the very first commercial company which is able basically to develop a system which allows the United States not to be any longer connected with Russia. It's a strategic huge importance. That is one element which has been achieved. SpaceX is launching regularly about 70 satellites every launch for their own constellation, and as been said earlier, they have tried the Starship. So huge success, bright prospect.
Mr. Yang, your judgment.
Well, that's, of course, this year is the SpaceX have great achievements. The Demo 2 mission and the Crew 1 mission are very successful by the Crew Dragon spaceship. So for the first time after 2011, the U.S. can launch manned spacecraft to the ISS and can have their astronauts taken to the ISS by their own launch vehicles. But you see, that although Mr. Giuseppe Rivati has mentioned the Starship, but I think it is still a very long way to go. There is an interesting thing I can tell you, that Mr. Azzadullah, who is a very famous gentleman in the space field, have a gamble with me last year because we attended the Wuhan Commercial Space Forum. He said that this year the SpaceX can launch the Starship into orbit, but I said no, it cannot, because it is really, really difficult. And you see, there are still several days to the end of this year, but still they only developed the Starship, the second stage, and the first stage of the Starship is bigger and even tough. So I think in the future, and also moreover, you see that Elon Musk only provides transportation solution to the Mars, but still the human being must face many technical challenges, such as the radiation protection, such as the on-site resource utilization on Mars. All these problems must be solved, not by a single company.
Very interesting. About the Mars, there are enormous amount of questions that need to be resolved. Dr. Ghosh, you earlier also talked about that. What do you consider as some of the biggest priorities right now regarding Mars?
If you look at Elon Musk, his plans, what he's trying to do, these are the priorities. You have to start on-orbit refueling of the spacecraft of Starship. You have to have a way to refuel the spacecraft in Mars. That means extracting oxygen from Martian soil. which Perseverance will show in few months. So all centered around making fuel in Mars and in during transit. So these are the greatest priorities, to make Mars reachable.
And
and
NASA's
affordable.
plan would be very similar to that with Elon Musk's, or you have a different approach?
NASA is not doing much, I think, about going to humans, going to Mars with human beings. That is what SpaceX is doing. What NASA is doing here is in situ resource utilization, which is extracting oxygen from Martian soil.
Yeah.
So for that, there is an instrument on Mars rover Perseverance, which lands in February, and that will be a technology demonstration. Yes, so there is a different approach, I guess.
Yeah, very interesting. My last question. We have seen some new development in terms of our research into the outer space. For example, a report went out not long ago suggesting the outer space is not, quote-unquote, as dark as we expected it was. Of course, these are just bits and pieces we have discovered about the outer space. Now, Mr. Riboldi, what does all of this mean? I mean, if we think more about our exploration of the outer space and now what we can do to the moon and what we could be doing on the Mars. So where is it really driving us to, particularly in a time when we are really challenged on the Earth by the pandemic?
Well, I think space activities are for the benefit of humankind. And this is something which, unfortunately, has not been made clear. And so I think we have to try to explain this to the people. So every, let's say, amount of money, euro, dollars, spent in space exploration or space development, it's basically have a multiplier factor of about 6 to 7 on Earth. And this is related to the fact that it creates a new market, it creates new employment. But what is most important, as you rightfully said, we are having technology, space technology, to basically help solve the challenges that we have on Earth. So we have many challenges. Pandemic is, of course, one that we're all facing. And how can space technology help these kind of challenges? Well, in several ways, by doing technology, by solving difficult issues. As I like to recall what President Kennedy said, they've gone to the moon not because it's easy, but because it's technology is supposed, and it is, solving successfully hard and, let's say, resolved problem, because we are facing for the first time. It is this approach, which is a winning approach to solve problems, hopefully together. I expect exploration is showing that is going to help humanity to move forward and solve everyday challenges.
Okay, Dr. Ghosh.
So I had a quick point to make here. So if you think about space, we are really very helpless. We cannot even travel to our nearest star. It will take, I don't know, 200,000 years to get to the nearest star. So we are really playing in our own backyard, in our own solar system. We don't even have a proper way to go beyond Pluto. So we are still lost in the cosmos. But near term, what we can really, I think the next 10 or 20 years will yield is the search for life. So life, I think the pandemic has taught us we know very little of biology. And we know very little of life. Today, if you ask, we still don't know when life or how life or why life formed. Yeah. Nobody knows why a chunk of inanimate matter suddenly becomes a living cell. And that answer will be found in the solar system, I think, in the next 20 years. And where will it be found? There are these satellites of Jupiter and Saturn that have underground oceans, perhaps as big as the Pacific Ocean. And in the Earth, life formed in the oceans. And so there may be life in these underground oceans of these satellites. And so that is what will be a priority, and that is what will be the next space next frontier of human exploration
Very
of
interesting.
the solar system.
Mr. Yang, your final thoughts.
Well, you mentioned about the pandemic. You know that China have a very good achievements in control the pandemic. During this process, the space technology plays a very, very important role. You see that with the positioning technology from the navigation satellites, we can have a very precise trace of the evidence of the patients upstream, and we can find the source of the virus. And also, you know that in the future, our station will have very good research, and one of the important area is medicine making, and we can maybe in the future, in the microgravity environment, we can have more perfect vaccines and other medicines. So you see that these kind of technologies, also the lunar exploration program you mentioned, either manned-man or robotic ones, do have contributions from the technical aspect to these kind of technologies.
Thank you so much, gentlemen. I learned a lot through conversations with you. Thank you, really appreciate it. Yang Yuguang and Giuseppe Riboldi. Last but not least, Artemis Accord. Thank you so much. Question about the space competition and what we can learn from history. I have been also talking to Dr. Christian Feitinger, who's the Executive Director of the International Astronautical Federation. Let's listen into what he said. On the discussion about the human space mission for the year 2020, now I'm also joined by Dr. Christian Feitinger, Executive Director at the International Astronautical Federation. Mr. Feitinger, what a pleasure. Tell me more about what you make of the year.
For space, the year 2020 promised to be a very, very interesting year with many, many new initiatives and interesting projects in the field of space exploration. As we call it, 2020 is certainly a year to go to the Mars, and we've seen several missions to go to the Mars, including established space nations like the US and China, but also emerging space countries like Arab Emirates launching their Mars missions. And of course, we are all very curious to look forward to the arrival of these missions. At the same time, 2020, I think, was also a year that hampered a lot of activities. Not the least, the European-Russian ExoMars program had to be postponed, and that was originally planned to also launch in 2020. And certainly the worldwide pandemic also had its negative impact on this.
You know, the complex, the geopolitical atmosphere, possibly over the past few years, what's its impact, do you think, on the current realities of space exploration?
Certainly, politics always plays a role in how to set up partnerships. One needs to say that space has been used twofold. On the one hand side, it sometimes is used also as a political instrument to demonstrate strength or to point out partnerships. On the other hand, space exploration has always been also a topic of competition. I mean, let's look back at the times of the Cold War, where the East and the West were competing of who is going to be first in space, who is going to be first humans, bringing humans to space, who will be first on the moon. And of course, one needs to say that competition can be a very strong driver for achieving things in a very short time. On the other hand, the scale of projects that are in front of us, if we think about going to the moon in a sustainable way, going further to Mars, dictates the necessity of cooperation. And I think all the space nations of this world have understood this and are in one or the other way trying to build alliances and partnerships. Sometimes, of course, influenced also by the political background.
How do you think, Mr. Feitinger, during the Cold War time, the space competition between the former Soviet Union and the United States, now in retrospect, has it helped the space industry, or has it rather put it in an unrepeated path, so to speak?
Well, my personal opinion is that it has, of course, helped to achieve things quicker than they might have been achieved without having this, let's call it, race. Of course, competition, which is based on national pride and prestige, is a very strong driver to make the enormous financial means available. And not only the financial means, it's always also the question of the acceptance and support of the broad community, of the broad population. So the national prestige element and competition, I think, has been a very important driver to achieve what has been achieved.
We have been looking at the situation very closely. For example, after the Cold War, how the former Soviet Union, then now Russia, has been cooperating with the European partners and also working with China on the space exploration project. How do you see the change, so to speak, after the Cold War? And what can it help us to understand about space exploration and human cooperation?
Well, I think one needs to mention here the International Space Station, which I think is the biggest symbol of the global cooperation in space exploration, which has cost a huge amount of effort and financial means, but can be really called of one of the most successful international cooperation projects ever endeavored. And if you look back at the history, after the breakdown of the Soviet Union, of course, Russia was struggling to keep their place in space. And I think one needs to compliment and really acknowledge that it is that Russia has achieved to keep their role as one of the leading space powers through very, very difficult times. I've been personally at that time in Russia representing the European Space Agency, and I could witness how difficult it was really in times where political and economic stability were given to maintain the high expenditure and the high big effort, and also the system that was based on a totally different economic system to stay an active player in space. You know that Russia has been leading, has been always leading the effort in space stations with their Salute station, with their Mir space station. And when the discussion came up about participating or not participating for Russia in the International Space Station, I think this was a key decision to be taken, that Russia was joining the efforts and that the International Space Station really became a truly international space station. And the decisive factor is really that the partners there have been ready to make themselves intentionally dependent on each other. And if Russia had not the effort of the International Space Station, and by doing so provide a redundant space transportation system for the station, after the shuttle problems, the station would have not been able to be sustained.
I see.
So we should learn from history, and we need to be clear that in order to maintain a complex infrastructure in orbit, be it now in orbit around the Earth or around the Moon or anywhere else, we need to have redundancy, specifically redundant space transportation systems.
Very interesting. Dr. Christian Feitinger, Executive Director of the International Astronautical Federation. What a pleasure. Thank you so much. And that's all the time we have for today, our special program on the outer space exploration by human being for the year 2020. If you'd like to see more, you can search us at World Insight or check out our YouTube channel, follow us on Twitter and Facebook. I'm Tian Wei on behalf of the team. Thanks for watching.